Hello Sunrise family, welcome back to day 3 of our video series on Christian mindfulness. I'm Pastor Amy. We are hoping that with each new day we can give you a new practice, a new tool to be able to learn how to connect with God in the present moment, be able to try to maintain that throughout your moments and throughout your days. Today we're going to be talking about scripture mindfulness, particularly the practice that has come to be known as Lectio Divina. For so many people, reading the Bible and studying the Bible is really tricky. It can be confusing, it can be hard to understand, and that's largely due to the fact that much of it was written millennia ago in different cultures and in completely different time periods. And so it's difficult to parcel out, what is a cultural trapping and what is an eternal truth that God has for us today. And a lot of the times we don't have the tools at our disposal to understand the cultural history and the context in which it was written, or the people for whom it was written, or by whom it was written. Any particular passage, and so it's really difficult to be able to apply that. And studying scripture is so important because there are so many truths for us today. But there's another way to approach scripture, and it's different than we approach other texts, because we tend to approach a textbook or a piece of fiction or an instruction manual or anything like that. We tend to approach those with, what are we going to get out of it? And when we approach scripture with, what am I going to get out of it today? We miss some of the opportunity to just sit and be with God in those words of scripture. And so the practice of Lectio Divina is less concerned with, what am I going to get out of it? What am I going to learn? What answers am I going to try and figure out or solve? And it's more concerned with just being with God. So it's not as important how much scripture you get through, whether it's 1 or 2 verses is just fine. It's a way to meditate on scripture and just be in the presence of God and be able to just sit with it and listen. I invite you to join me now. I invite you now to join me as we practice together scripture mindfulness and a form that we call Lectio Divina. As with any mindfulness practice, it begins by breathing. So I invite you to breathe in and breathe out, being aware of your breath, being aware of the parts of your body that you are using to breathe. And we begin with that attentive breathing posture, followed by attentive embodiment. As you notice your breathing and embodiment, acknowledge what arises as you let God hold it with you. A regular mindfulness pause as you are reading scripture allows you to listen with the ear of the heart to the spirit that is bringing life through the word. You can begin your scripture reading this way and pause at any time during your scripture reading and practice the 4 steps of mindfulness. In a posture of openness and discovery and listening for what hope, what truth, what comfort God has for you in these words. For this particular session of Lectio Divina, I have chosen 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. Simply 2 verses. Because remember, in Lectio Divina practice, we are not concerned with the amount of scripture we get through or with trying to analyze or figure it out. You can focus instead on just a verse or 2 or a small passage. And we usually repeat it a couple of times to open ourselves to God and listen and allow this scripture to soak in a couple of different ways, and maybe the second or third time we'll hear it from a slightly different angle. So continue your breathing, continue your mindfulness, continue to acknowledge what arises in you as you are listening and meditating on this scripture. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. Continue breathing. As thoughts arise, as sensations arise, acknowledge them. Let this be a time of discovery. Now, the Lord is Spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. Feel free to continue reading this scripture and breathing, and we'll see you tomorrow for the prayer practice of St. Patrick.